people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. Word around the campfire seems to be that Romero versus Paulette Valenzuela is going down later on this month in Argentina, and they are fighting for the vacant WBA title. Shown live on TYC Sports in Argentina and South America, Boxeo de Primera posts that DAZN will transmit the event globally, and it will be DAZN's first live broadcast from Argentina.
Oh, well, that's good news.
The fight will be available here in the United States via DAZN. The fight is a fight of some consequence. The byproduct of Erica Cruz testing positive for one or two banned substances, and as a result of that being stripped of her WBA title, it is now up for grabs.
We don't know what's going to happen with her.
For Nazarena, this will be her third crack at the apple. She had her first with Mayerlin Rivas, then her second with Erica Cruz. Both fights ended up being scored draws.
So perhaps the third time will be the charm.
She has something working for her in this fight that she didn't have in the previous two title fights. She will have home field advantage. Sporting a professional record of 13 wins with no losses, 2 draws, 7 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 15 professional bouts, to Paulette Valenzuela, who's a bit more experienced, more seasoned, sporting a professional record of 17 wins with 3 losses, no draws, 4 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 20 professional bouts.
What is another addition to the Argentina versus Mexico rivalry in boxing?
Nazarena's last opponent was from Mexico, and her next opponent is from Mexico, though she stands a much better chance of becoming a champion in this situation than the previous one.
I think she's going to do it.
Paulette Valenzuela may be a more experienced fighter than Romero, with more fights in the bank, more rounds, but it seems like every time they step her up, she falters, she loses. When she fought Yemi Mercado for Yemi's WBC, when she fought Sigaline Lafarve for Sigaline's WBO,
she lost.
She is a good and serviceable fighter that can push back a bit, though not enough to seal the deal and secure the win in the bigger fights with the better names. Having last seen action in February of this year, she won a majority decision opposite the ring Cristina Hernandez. Before that, she fought 2 times last year, and she's already fought once this one. So the night of, she won't have any ring rust to shake off. The same applies to Nazarena. Nazarena has seen action in the last 12 months. She won't have any ring rust to shake off either.
They're both about as ready as they're gonna be.
I like Nazarena Romero to win on her own home turf, on her own home soil. I think her aggressive approach will be appreciated by the judges. I don't know that she knocks Paulette Valenzuela out, as Paulette has never been knocked out.
But I do think Nazarena can beat her. At minimum, I think Nazarena can beat her on points.
Just staying in character and being who she is, who she has been, a very prolific and spiteful puncher within a round in a fight. That's Nazarena Romero's calling card. Pressure fighting. She wins later on this month. She joins the pantheon of champions in the super bantamweight division. Unified Ring Magazine champion Ellie Scottney. Long-reigning WBC champion of Mexico, Yemi Mercado.
Very soon, Nazarena Romero, if and when she becomes WBA champion, the biggest fight for her then becomes the Ellie Scottney fight, the Ellie Scottney unification match.
That is the biggest bang for your buck fight at these weights, as Ellie Scottney is the only one of these aforementioned fighters that's with a major promotional outfit boxing on a major platform.
We're in August.
If Nazarena Romero becomes champion later on this month, you then have, say, October, November, or December to schedule a unification match between Nazarena and Ellie Scottney. Ellie wants to become undisputed champion. A part of that is facing the winner of this fight, and the winner, I think, is going to be Nazarena Romero. Just some things to think about ahead of this title fight. The winner of it, whoever it is, enters Ellie Scottney's crosshairs for her overall goal of becoming this division's undisputed champion. Big scene. at 122. In men's lightweight news, former IBF super featherweight champion Joe Cordina on course for Shakur Stevenson after a split from trainer Tony Sims.
He's cashing out.
Joe Cordina will prepare for his next opponent with a new trainer after parting with Tony Sims. Discussions are unfolding for a potential fight between the Welshman and Shakur Stevenson on the undercard of the undisputed light heavyweight title fight between Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol on October 12th in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. It was in Riyadh in May where the 32-year-old Cordina lost for the first time, when as the IBF super featherweight champion he was stopped by Anthony Cacace. He has long spoken of his desire to move up to 135 and also to fight Stevenson, who's 27. Whether or not Stevenson versus Cordina happens next may yet to be determined by the outcome of purse bids ordered for a fight between the WBC lightweight champion and William Zepeda. But Sims, who has worked with Cordina for the past 7 years and who remains on good terms with his former fighter, will not be in his corner. Cordina is expected to announce his new trainer soon, and regardless of the existing trend among many of his contemporaries who seek to work with American trainers to recruit another based in Britain.
I wouldn't worry about that William Zepeda purse bid, because if push comes to shove, Oscar will just pull him out, aim him in another direction for another title.
William Zepeda, I don't think he's going to be next. I don't. I think it's going to be Joe. As it pertains to Joe, it looks to me like Joe is cashing out, that he's not long for the sport of boxing when you consider that so soon after the first professional loss of his career, a knockout loss, not only is he moving up in weight, but he's fighting somebody like Shakur.
It's not the kind of guy you fight your first fight at a weight, not if you just lost.
Then you sack Tony Sims. You get rid of Tony Sims. It just gives me the impression that this guy's trying to make the most money that he can make as quickly as possible so that he can bow out. That's how it looks. Why else would he be fighting Shakur unless they offered him a lot of money to do it?
Think he's fighting him on the cheap?
Of course he isn't. Why would he? Why would he take a fight like that at a new weight unless the money was too good to turn down? They're likely offering him a lot of money, maybe a career high purse to do it, so he's doing it. But I don't like the fight. I don't like Shakur Stevenson versus Joe Cordina off a loss.
Shakur wanted to fight Vasyl Lomachenko, who's supposed to sit out the rest of this year. He wanted Vasyl Lomachenko. When he couldn't get him, he decides he doesn't want to be at Top Rank anymore. He leaves.
To do this? You're telling me this is better, or supposed to be better, than exploring a Denis Berinchyk fight, a Denis Berinchyk unification match. For fighting Joe Cordina off a loss as a free agent, you could have stayed at Top Rank and unified titles with Denis. That would have been better.
I think that would have been better.
Get yourself 2 alphabet titles, become the lightweight division's only unified champion. I would have preferred a Denis Berinchyk fight over a Joe Cordina fight. Joe's gonna lose. We all know he's gonna lose.
You think Dennis would have won?
I think Dennis would have been able to make things more interesting than Joe Cordina off a knockout loss to a guy who's not even heavy-handed, a guy who really ain't known as a puncher. Anthony Cacace, God bless him, he ain't the super featherweight division's Artur Beterbiev, and he knocked out Joe.
Joe got rid of Tony.
So if the whole reason Joe Cordina's punch resistance went in the Anthony Cacace fight, if the whole reason that happened is because he stayed at the weight too long, then why'd you get rid of Tony? It's not Tony's fault.
They said they're on amicable terms.
Well, I'm not saying that they're not, but if what happened to you because you stayed at a weight too long and now you're moving up to a more comfortable weight for yourself, why did you get rid of Tony? And the only inference I can make is because this guy is cashing out. He's not long for the sport of boxing. He doesn't plan on being around much longer, and he's just trying to make as much money as he can make as quickly as possible.
That's it.
Turkey is making this fight for the undercard of Beterbiev versus Bivol. Can't say it's a mouth-watering fight, but because Turkey is interested in making fights for Shakur, maybe after this, he'll make the Denis Berinchyk fight, that unification match, or maybe he'll offer to pay for Stevenson versus Lomachenko. That's the fight Shakur was asking for. That's the one he wanted.
Afterwards.
Maybe Turkey will offer to make it. He seems to have a working relationship with everyone in the industry. Matchroom, Queensbury, Top Rank. Pooling these fighters together to make the very best fights possible. I can't say a Joe Cordina fight.
William Zepeda would have been better, but you can't force William to do it, and you can't force Golden Boy to play ball.
So this is a stay busy fight for Shakur, and a chance for him to get back out there for the second time this year. He was already out there not that long ago against Artem Haratunian. Lackluster run this year. Artem Haratunian to Joe Cordina off a loss. Two guys that were coming off losses.
Yikes.
It's like anything and everything else involving an American fighter or an American-based fighter these days. It's just lackluster. Thankfully, Fabio Wortley versus Fraser Clark, a battle of the Brits, is also set to go down on that same undercard, and I'm looking forward to that, having seen the first fight. The second one, I've no doubts will deliver, even if Shakur Stevenson's next fight doesn't. We have that to look forward to on the undercard of Better Be versus Bivol.
There will be more additions.
Because this fight seems to involve so many different fighters from so many different promotional outfits and different platforms, I've no doubts they will all be distributing this show.
Sky, DAZN, ESPN.
They will all distribute this show, likely a pay-per-view, but given the main event, it's absolutely worth it. I've been waiting for Better Be versus Bivol a long while.
So it's worth the money.
I think it is, more so than some other pay-per-views.
Concerned that he has an ego and that his ego is going to stop him from dealing with certain individuals, that he's drawing lines in the sand.
Do you know how many buys there was for the Crawford pay-per-view?
Only rumors that, I don't know that rumor we can run with.
I have it on good authority that it wasn't 200,000. You know,
That it was more, I hope.
it was less. It was
Jesus.
200,000, just shy of 200,000. I'm not surprised, man. There's pay-per-view fatigue, dude. How much pay-per-view could the fans handle? So here's what's happening right now, right? If Turkey has it his way, everything's going to be a pay-per-view. And fighters that wouldn't be on pay-per-view now are behind that $80 payment. And while you guys are happy with it, and I understand, you guys are used to paying $80 and you're getting what you want. If this sport continues to be continuing down this pay-per-view route, we're on a slow march to death, to extinction.
And now for a second look at Gary Jonas's comments about the overuse of the pay-per-view model. In my previous video, we talked about how he was trying to outsource the blame for an oversaturated pay-per-view market on Turkey Al-Sheikh, who really hasn't even been here all that long, and how if you really want to blame somebody for that, you'd sooner blame Al Heyman and his PBC than Turkey, because the PBC puts out more pay-per-views than anybody and everybody, and they've been doing that for a long time.
It's what we talked about in my previous video. In this segment,
We'll be a little less specific, with less of a focus on the PBC and their assembly line of pay-per-views, and take a broader view, a broader scope. Because what's been happening in America to the sport year by year and decade by decade, at least in part, was a slow burn. So boxing was at its biggest when it was on terrestrial television, that much more accessible to that many more American homes. But boxing's move from terrestrial TV over to premium cable networks like HBO, like Showtime, when they were in boxing,
it had an adverse effect on the sport that I don't think many people are aware of.
for those of you in the 40-plus crowd, 50, old enough to remember, not everybody had premium cable. Some people just had basic.
And the ones who just had basic cable, well, they were missing out on all those big-time boxing matches happening on HBO, then subsequently Showtime.
Sparking the gradual decay of the boxing market, the audience that consumes boxing, because if most of the boxing is happening on premium cable networks, and most people don't have premium cable, you're cutting down the size of the audience little by little, year by year, decade by decade.
This was a slow burn. That's why most people didn't notice it. The change didn't happen right away. It happened over time.
The audience that consumes boxing was getting smaller and smaller. The advent of boxing moving over to premium cable networks, most exclusively, and then the advent of pay-per-views, the pay-per-view model, an opportunity for the fighters and the promoters to put on big-time boxing matches for big money, very big money.
That limits the size of the audience, too.
It's not saying that pay-per-view should never be used. That's ridiculous. But pay-per-view should only be used for the biggest of the big fights and the biggest of the big names, the biggest of the big shows.
It was never intended for every fighter. It was never intended for every fight, every run-of-the-mill fight like what you see today.
And what you see today, fights like Benavidez versus Plant, or Benavidez versus Andrade, should you have really had to pay $80 to see those fights? What was so great about those fights?
Why were they on pay-per-view?
You could have brought in a lot of viewers with the both of those fights to that platform if it were a regular fight and not a box office fight. If it's a box office fight, only so many people are going to buy it. So why did it end up there?
Because the fighters want a lot of money.
Because the fighters want a lot of money, more than the network is just going to give them, guarantee them, and the only way to get them that money is to bill it as a box office fight.
This is nuanced.
Fighters want a lot of money. Everybody wants a lot of money. Me and you want a lot of money. So what separates what should be on pay-per-view and what shouldn't?
The market. The market dictates the value of a show, not the fighter or his manager and their inflated purse demands.
The market. Underneath it all, I think a lot of people are playing dumb and have been playing dumb. Underneath it all, I think they know which fights involving which fighters warrant a pay-per-view and which fights don't. Benavidez versus Plant, Benavidez versus Andrade, those should not have been pay-per-views.
Zoo versus Fundora should not have been a pay-per-view.
Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin, nobody was asking for that. That should not have been a pay-per-view.
No, but wait a minute. Gervonta does great gates.
But he doesn't do great pay-per-view numbers. He doesn't. The only time he's done significant numbers on pay-per-view was with Ryan. The rest of the time, the guy's hovering at or around 200,000 buys. And 200,000 buys.
Oh, you and your team, you get to make a little bit of extra money on pay-per-view, but it's at the expense of the greater audience.
The boxing community at large. That in excess of 1 million people or 500,000 people, they are not going to buy your fight. Those are all eyes that you are not bringing to these platforms. And when these platforms see that, well, this content isn't really getting us views, it's not bringing eyes to our platform,
they'll decide that they don't need it. Like NBC did, like Fox did, like Showtime more recently.
which causes boxing to slip even further into the background of the American sporting landscape. There's a reason that sports like the NFL and the NBA are more popular in America than boxing is right now, and it's because they're more accessible.
Boxing used to be easily accessible, and when it was bigger. Much bigger then than it is now.
Overuse of the pay-per-view model has come at a great cost. Everybody's trying to make off like a bandit, and when everybody's trying to do that, nobody's doing that.
What?
Almost nobody's putting up big numbers on pay-per-view right now. You can count on one hand, and you won't even need all 5 fingers to count how many fighters out there can put up serious numbers with a fight.
You guys are trying to squeeze blood out of a grape when you ask the same niche audience that is shrinking to constantly go into their wallets.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. I'm not proposing that everything be free. I'm proposing that something has to change, that there shouldn't be this many pay-per-views. Some of these fighters...
You need to get real.
Davis versus Martin should not have been a pay-per-view. Haney versus Prograis should not have been a pay-per-view.
I can go on.
So there's your problem. The sport of boxing and some of the people in it insist on taking and continuously taking without giving very much back.
The audience isn't going to put up with what can only be described as price gouging.
That's where piracy comes into it. That's why piracy is at an all-time high. They want to see this stuff, but they don't want to pay an arm and a leg to do it.
It's a vicious cycle.
Overuse of the pay-per-view model is why boxing is in the state it's in the American landscape. That's why it's not as big as it used to be. So to make it bigger, you need to do the opposite.
We'll talk about that in another video.